Well, it's the all-guy edition of the Public Square this week. I'm Wayne Shepherd with Dave Zanotti, and let's see, Alan C. Duncan is here as our producer. Rob Walgate is here. Handsome Jeff Sanders is here. So it's all guys today, Dave.
Well, we've pulled ourselves away from the Little League World Series.
I know, sure, right.
to come back to work and to talk about a subject today, Wayne, that I think some people are going to be tempted to turn the dial on because we are about to enter into a conversation on real estate.
I think this is our first ever conversation about real estate.
First ever conversation about real estate.
It reminds me of Lucy and Charlie Brown Christmas. What do you really want for Christmas? Real estate.
I know how you feel about all this Christmas business. Getting depressed and all that. It happens to me every year. I never get what I really want. I always get a lot of stupid toys or a bicycle or clothes or something like that. What is it you want? Real estate.
That was great. That's a classic.
That is perfect.
So please don't turn the dial. Don't turn the dial.
And the reason that we want to talk about this has a lot to do with a passion that we've begun to pick up among people, particularly in the markets where we serve, where our offices are around, in northeastern Ohio and central Florida and middle Tennessee. And then what we've discovered is that the lament that we've been hearing from so many people about the unavailability of single-family dwellings has some stacked up public policy issues connected to it, and that people are frustrated almost everywhere in the country because it's so difficult to buy a home.
And when you think about it, what did the American dream used to be? I mean, it was tied to that, correct? It was tied to property.
Yeah.
To have your own home. That was the dream.
Well, Alan, so it's not working out so good. So you've been collecting a number of articles and watching all this. Let's talk about it from your perspective for a second.
Sure. Well, yeah, some of the articles that we passed around, one of them from The Atlantic entitled How Wall Street Bought Up America's Homes. Those have been out for a few years, but you know, we had a pandemic, we had some other things, we had the COVID chronicles we had to do, we've had some elections, and so it'd been kind of something that had been in the background we'd wanted to talk about, and today, so we're finally doing it. It's been something I've been wanting to talk about for a while. So I finally sat down to go through the articles again yesterday to brush back up on this topic that we've been wanting to get to. My wife was sitting there, and I said, just so you know, I'm going to become increasingly more enraged the further I get into this article.
Feed her chocolate immediately.
Fair warning. Yeah. Fair warning.
And she said, when are you not becoming increasingly more enraged? So it makes me frustrated when I see bullies picking on the little guy.
Right.
And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I think when you see Wall Street buying up a bunch of houses after they helped to precipitate a housing crash, they're enriching themselves off of a crisis that they helped to perpetuate, makes a lot of people angry. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from on this.
And they're buying them for cash.
Yes.
Very often, at least in my neck of the woods in the Chicago area, they're paying over market price.
Well, in addition to that, I'm finding out from studying the articles that Alan's been briefing us on over the last couple of weeks, when they do finance, they're getting extraordinary low rates that you can't even hold a candle to in the residential consumer market. So this is a big part. So what's the ramification of this? We began to run into this with the young people that we work with in Nashville. Nashville's got Middle Tennessee has a number of quality institutions of higher learning colleges there. And so a lot of people come to college in Nashville. And what a lot of the colleges had seen for years is that they would come to Nashville, come to college, and graduate and stay in Middle Tennessee because they loved it. They met people there. They perhaps found a spouse while they were in school, and they got married and settled down. And so part of the population increase in the Middle Tennessee area has been college students sticking around. Well, when they do that, they used to be able to go out and get, now these weren't always the greatest paying jobs in the world based on the fields that they were in, but they were able, as two-income families, to at least be able to go out and rent a property and then begin to build their, like everybody else, hard way, climb your way up and then hope to have a home and climb your way up all those pieces and parts. Well, When the bigs started coming in from Wall Street, finance companies, and setting up investment property organizations, they started to buy up all the small homes in the older neighborhoods. They would buy them and they would rent them, but suddenly they would sort of like, they quote, they flip them, and the rates started to soar. And so you've got people paying $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom, 900 square foot little house in a neighborhood, and they're paying some conglomerate investment operation that's been buying up everything that they could get their hands on because it's such a hot market for starting family homes. So they not only did they take the mom and pop renter or landlord out of the game, they've also taken these houses off the market to purchase. Now, that's a second level of this problem that is just ridiculous because you cannot find a home in Middle. Here's what a starter home in Middle Tennessee looks like. And I'm talking about 50 miles from the radius of downtown Nashville. Wayne, you know this area.
Yeah,
I mean, you're the guy who brought me to Tennessee.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. All right. I'll take credit.
It was your fault. It was that first recording session with Michael Card. That was it. That
and real estate was a lot cheaper then, wasn't it? Well, what were we thinking? What were we thinking? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. In fact, think? Well, yeah. And so this is the situation at 50 miles around. Take a map and look at it and see Nashville. And what you will discover is that the starting home, you want to buy a starting home in Nashville, like maybe 1,200 square feet, 1,500 square feet, you better have $350,000 to $400,000.
And be ready to enter into a bidding war with a dozen other buyers.
In a bidding war, and if you don't have the inside lead and you're not first and your opening bid isn't above offer, you may not get a second look, even have a chance in line. The houses disappear in 48 hours tops.
Do you remember how when we, back in the ancient world, we would buy a house? Well, Alice and I did this a couple of times.
BC, before COVID?
Yeah, exactly. We would actually write a letter to the homeowner.
Yes.
Explaining who we were. We're moving in. We've got, 2.5 children. We're really nice. I'm a minister, blah, 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 blah.
And a freaky large cat.
Yeah. He's a cool cat. He's a cool cat.
All right. And, you lost me at the cat, but go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. Oh, man. I'm a cat guy. Anyway.
Oh, no.
And they would sell to us because as part of the deal, they would read these letters and say, we really feel sorry for that guy with the cool cat. And, and he's got the 2.5 children, but his wife is really nice, and they would actually sell to us. Did you know you can't do that? You cannot do that anymore.
You know what, Jeff? I heard a story the other day where someone is doing that now. There was a couple who were featured on a prominent media outlet the other day who talked about the love letter that they wrote trying to convince the buyer to sell the house to them. And it worked. In some isolated cases, it's working.
Well, my son was trying to buy a home up here in Ohio, where I live in Ohio, not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and the real estate agent told him that is illegal. You cannot do that.
Huh.
Yeah. So things have changed.
Has to be the state. Yeah, it has to be something in the state.
So there are a number of layers of this problem, and for people that are strong in economics, I'm going to tell you that I don't see in the room anyone with a PhD in economics. So what we're going to talk about here is the amateur spin. We're looking up. Now, we do have some pretty strong credentials in the realm of public policy, constitutional law, and all that kind of stuff, but not on economics. And so some of the things that we say are going to be subject to review. So this is one of those opportunities where we would be happy to invite listeners to say, well, you got this wrong or you missed it right here. Did you consider the other? Now, please, when you write, don't write, it's like, don't write like you're writing to the old Jane Curtin, Dan Aykroyd Saturday Night Live skit by saying, "Dear Dave, you ignorant moron." It's just there's plenty of.
He didn't say that.
Wait a minute,
That's the edited version.
Yeah, we've never read mean tweets on the air of the public square.
Never.
Have we?
We don't clean them up. No, we don't read the mean ones.
We got a few.
But everybody here has bought at least one house.
Yes.
So we know something about buying and selling homes.
And we have family members and friends, just like everybody else, that are giving us all of their reports from multiple places in the country. So we're going to be asking questions. We're going to be pointing some fingers, but those fingers are basically asking why. Why is it that, as Alan mentioned, after the housing crisis of 8, 9, and 10, and all that collapsed and all that fell down, there was a lot of questions on that bailout as to who, Too Big to Fail is a great piece to watch on Amazon. I encourage it to everybody, an insider's look from the book as to what actually happened on the derivatives and all of that stuff on real estate.
Saturday Night Live did a skit on that as well that kind of got pulled and raised a lot of eyebrows in regards to the banking industry and what was done in the manipulation of perspectives and buying and selling and what they were doing with people's mortgages.
So we're over a target zone here that is significant, and the impact of it is hitting everybody. Now, we started off with the large financial concerns that are entering into purchasing single-family homes for the purposes of renting them. But let's take it just one step farther and remind people that some of these companies now are buying up these properties and then turning them into investment opportunities for others. They're marketing them. So let's say a company comes in and spends $1 billion on housing and then say, okay, we've got all these houses. How would you like to invest in our company? And we'll give you a very significant return compared to the market because we've got these companies at X dollar, we're renting them out at Y dollars, and there's profit to be made. If you want to invest in, you can get a piece of the assets. Now think about that. And I've even heard these people advertising with Christian broadcasters. I've heard them advertising. Now, yeah. I'm curious, has anyone thought through the other side of that equation, which is all the families that need help that can't get homes because people are selling off into the high rent investment world?
All right. Well, we're off and running today. On real estate is our topic here on the Public Square. You stay with us. If you ever have to leave us and catch the rest of the program, do it online at thepublicsquare.com.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Back with you on the Public Square now. As we tackle this topic today, I'm thinking about flipping it around. Think about the seller in this situation. Many times, the seller's been in that home for 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, and maybe they're looking to downsize and they don't know what to do with everything in the house, and suddenly these companies come along and say, don't worry about it. You can leave everything in the house and we'll give you a big lump cash sale real quick and you're out of here. And it's a very attractive to sellers.
Sure it is, without a doubt. Better than a reverse mortgage, yeah.
Yeah, Wayne, I know people that have had that opportunity where they've sat there and thought, wow, I really don't want to do this, but I'm getting offered $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 over market price. How am I going to say no? I'm one person in the sea. I don't want to stand against this, but this deal's too good and it can benefit a family in ways that you didn't think it could. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered there. You feel like you're contributing to the problem, right, but also you have a lot of blood, sweat, and tears you put into that house. Do you deserve a little bit to get out of it?
Well, I think that's a fair question, and people have to make their own decisions about this. I would just encourage people, we do a lot of looking at ballot language, and we talk about the unforeseen consequences or what's coming down the road. So that may make sense for one family on one particular day, but then you think about that house then being off the market in perpetuity, potentially. There's always a chance maybe it comes back, but when they buy up these big portfolios, sometimes they're buying whole neighborhoods. That's off the market, and that's something that some of these housing experts are talking about. And so I would just say, just consider the future ramifications of doing that. And sure, that's one family, but a lot of families doing it adds up. They talk about they're trying to institutionalize the renting market. That always makes me a little nervous. Anytime you want to let's institutionalize this,
especially when whole neighborhoods are that way.
What does that mean? They're not really. How are they defining it?
Or standardize. I guess standardize. It might even be the better word. They want to standardize and professionalize it. But the people that are being lost in this equation are the tenants. Those are the people that are ending up having to foot the bill for a lot of this. The Atlantic piece we read had a lot of horror stories, really, where. And it's not everyone, and the Atlantic piece makes that clear. These are certain instances, and there's a lot of people that this doesn't happen to. But there was one family whose house just continuously flooded, and they had trouble getting in contact with their landlord because their landlord is now a call center. And it's not your neighbor down the street who lives a community over who can come fix a pipe. There was someone whose deck caved in. So I think when the bottom line and the profits for investors is over tenant health and safety, I think we're in a problem, because they said their stated goal, these institutions said their stated goal is to reduce spending. Where have we all heard that phraseology before?
Boy, does that sound like the healthcare debate.
Right? We want to reduce spending.
Yeah.
So how do you reduce spending? Well,
and there's a difference.
Price me out of the market.
Yeah, right. From reducing costs and reducing spending is very different.
Yes.
Maybe difference there.
But that just jumped out to me out of this piece, that's what they want to do. They want to reduce spending. So tenants are being charged they're being nickel and dimed, all these fees for basic stuff. So just remember who's bearing the cost.
Well, and let's go back to first principles here, because this is how we have these conversations inside a think tank called the American Policy Roundtable, and we try to figure out what is the right position on this, and what does the Bible teach? What does history tell us? What do the principles of the Declaration, the Constitution, the Northwest Ordinance, what do they provide? Let's talk about the question of private property. That is an inescapable reality. When you go back to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that pursuit of happiness was a last-minute edit. That line, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, really is life, liberty, and property. Mm-hmm. And that comes from John Locke in his second treatise on civil government. James Madison picked up on this concept of private property. It was Locke that basically made it clear that the purpose of civil government is primarily the protection of private property. That's why we institute governments, is to protect rights. And among those chief and first foremost rights is the right to private property. Now, Locke went so far as to help us understand, and Madison did as well, working off of that in his treatise on conscience, to say that property also means your person, your conscience, your very conscience is your property. And government doesn't have the right to come in and take that away. So when it comes to the concept of the protection of and the right to private property, you couldn't be any stronger than where we're coming from. So lest someone would again wonder, we want to keep the guardrails up and people understanding this is not a woke conversation. It's anything but that. It's hopefully a reawakening conversation of saying, wait a minute, if we want to turn our nation into an institution of renters, are we not forsaking one of the core realities that people want, need, desire, were made to, which is to own property?
Yeah, and there's some people who their situation necessitates the need to rent.
Sure.
And they're
Yes.
going to live that way. So we understand that's a reality and it's going to happen. But when you talk about, and we talk about private property, I'm also reminded how important it is in the protection there of it, but also there was a Supreme Court case, was there not, the Kelo case, that dealt with eminent domain. So the importance of private property and having it, and sometimes the government's going to overreach and come take what's yours, and it's I feel it's as important as the individual having it and having that property right and knowing and understanding, because they're also, and again, studies and history teach us this, that there's something inside of us that makes us want to take care of it a little bit more when it's ours. We know it's ours and we're going to benefit from it in the long term.
You can take this all the way back to the garden, that we were given in the created order a place, and that place was to manage the earth.
Steward.
We were to steward and manage the earth. We were put here to do a job, and that job was given to us. Now, Locke said, when does the general property of the globe becomes someone's property, and that's when someone takes on the responsibility of stewarding it and investing. And that's how all of this idea of, well, how do you know what's yours? Well, that's before there were rules and governments and deeds and titles. It was based upon this person has invested themselves in the stewardship of this land.
You can go back 5,000 years in human history and find deeds, titles to land. You can look.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, you can go back to Akkadian writing, Ugaritic, what ancient Sumerian stuff and the cuneiform stuff looks like chicken scratching. And there are title deeds to land. This guy has this plot of land, and here are the boundary markers. And, of course, you find it all through the law of Moses in the Bible as well.
The whole Hebrew Republic was built on some very sincere and committed to land rules and organization and property ownership and family ownership.
So this isn't a new thing.
No, not at all.
Well, even when you look at the Native Americans on the North American continent, I've heard some people argue they didn't view land ownership the same way that the Europeans did, and this helped to cause the conflict. And I'm sure that there is truth to that. However, even we were talking about this before the show, Jeff, we were talking about Westerns and things like that.
Cool stuff.
Yes. The Native Americans had their own hunting grounds.
They did.
The Sioux and the Crow had their own territory. So maybe they didn't own individual plots of land.
They had their own cemeteries.
But it was, but there were territories that were respected by each individual community.
Right.
So this concept of property, it goes very deep, very, very deep in the culture in which we live. And so when we look at people being shut out of these processes, I think it's important. We've got to be careful, because when we talk about institutionalizing a community of renters, what are we really doing? This is a problem that we have across our entire economy. The idea that an asset is no longer an asset to be owned, developed, cared for. An asset now is a device that's to be used up and then cast away. And you have people talking about coming into a world where no one will own a car anymore. You'll just buy the right to transportation to places, or the opportunity. So, and now is that what's coming in regards to homes, where you will never own a home? You'll simply be a person that sits in a box, so to speak, or sits in a high rise.
There are some other factors involved. High taxes makes it hard to purchase a home. The mortgage rates are at a level, I think, highest in 20 years or so right now?
Yeah, more than that, I think, yeah.
Insurance has gone up. Home ownership is already difficult and getting more difficult. High prices, of course, it starts with the houses. And now this factor thrown in makes it even more difficult.
Well, that's going to lead us into a conversation of where are we on the question of interest rates. So, you brought up the big problem, Wayne, the big word, the interest rate situation. So we've got to wade in on that question.
Okay.
And let me pretend, or maybe I play the role so well it's natural. Let me be the stupid one here and just say, when it comes to interest rates, I've been asking myself the question for at least a year. Why? Why do they have to be so high?
All right. We need to talk about that, but we're going to have to wait until after the break to do so. You are listening to The Public Square. Today at the microphones, Dave Zanotti, Alan C. Duncan, our producer, Rob Woolgate, Jeff Sanders, and I'm Wayne Shepherd. And we will be back, but you can always catch us online anytime you have to miss a program. And, we'll miss you, of course, but you can go online to thepublicsquare.com and listen there, or you can use our smartphone app for the same purpose. The Public Square, free in your app store.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Talking about a housing crisis here in our country on the Public Square today. It's an issue of public policy, Dave.
It sure is, Wayne. And you made something, said something just a minute ago about we'll miss you. This is a different broadcast. And every now and then we do get letters from folks where they say, I turned off the radio, or you got me mad about this, and I'm not listening to you anymore. Or,
I'll show you, yeah.
I hope your support disappears, all that kind of stuff. And, look, people have the right to their own opinion. And I don't necessarily apologize if we get people nervous or uncomfortable or offended, because this is a different kind of radio program. I mean, people need to remember here, this is not a profit thing. We don't work for some major corporation that we're peddling for them. So we're talking about real estate, right? We don't have some sponsor behind us that's saying, hey, this is a great opportunity to plug my line. We don't do that. Furthermore, our program is not based on ratings or rankings. What we do is we try to tackle the same stuff everybody else is working on, and let it, we call this discovery radio, let you know what we're discovering. Now, sometimes we're half-baked, sometimes we're full-baked, So, sometimes we've got it right. Sometimes we need some improvement and some enhancements. But in no case are we in a position where we're dealing with customers or consumers. Our listeners are not customers because we're not selling anything. And furthermore, since we don't work for a major network, they can't pull us because of ratings. So when someone writes and says, the customer's always right and I'm the customer of your radio program and I'm not listening anymore. Well, okay, we'll miss you. But guess what? We weren't trying to sell you anything anyhow. So it's a different situation here. We're trying to figure this stuff out together. Now, I know that makes no sense because we're surrounded by talking heads in shrill silos that are endlessly and breathlessly trying to move people into the red camp or the blue camp or to this person or that personality or this side of a debate or that side. Look, we've got opinions. We share them, but we're looking for the truth. Yep. We don't own the truth. We're judged by it, and we're trying. So that, we're talking about real estate, and we're going to step on some toes. And sometimes we're affectionately, oops, we didn't mean to do that. And if your toes are stepped on and we've made a mistake, please extend the courtesy of helping us get smarter on this.
Sure.
Right. We would appreciate it.
Years and years ago, when I was making the decision whether to get involved with the public square or not, you described this as walk radio, not talk radio. Yeah. And I've never heard a better description, Dave.
Well, and that's what we've been at for a long time, and we're going to keep at it. So here's my question. Now, look, I understand that the Federal Reserve is a great mystery. I understand that for people that have been developing conspiracy theories for generations, everybody's got a piece in a chapter about the Fed. I get it. I've listened to these debates. I really have. I have listened for 40 years. I do not claim in any way, shape, or form to have mastered any of them. Now, I think that if Ron Paul was with us, that he could probably do a lecture series for us right now and fill in all the blanks as to his concerns about the Federal Reserve. I'm going to make it a lot simpler than that. There are 7 unelected people who sit on a commission and decide that they are going to determine what interest rates should be. That's the Fed's involvement. Now, the Fed is the central bank of the United States of America. It's not owned by the United States, but it is the central bank of that functions in this country, and it's made up of 12 member banks. But out of that network, there are 7 commissioners who decide what interest rates are.
How do they get to be a commissioner?
I think they're elected by the banks, and then they're because the presidents of each of the banks have to be nominated by the President of the United States and confirmed by Congress. So it's a quasi-private government organization. Okay. Got it. And already people are going, oh, where's the channel? I get it. Please don't freak out. I live in the same world you do. I don't like it. It makes me scared. It's like all of a sudden I realize there's a whole level of being a grown-up I don't want to be. Right? I just want to make my house payment. Leave me alone. I want to watch Netflix and Amazon like everybody else. Okay,
it's the one building in Washington D.C. that you drive by and you think, I wonder what they do in that building.
There, kind of like the IRS building.
So
also,
we're driving by it. This is years ago. Sorry, this will be a little bit of a story. Bub Walgate story.
Oh, there's always room for Bub.
So we're driving by in D.C. He went to a meeting with me. And we're driving by, and he rolls down the window. And you know how in D.C., you heard me talk about chaperoning 8th graders. They're always there. Students are always there. My dad rolls down the window in D.C. traffic and yells out the window, go inside and take as much as you can. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. Like, Dad, what are you talking about? Like, why would you say that? He goes, it's money. They print more every day, and those kids are responsible for the bill. They might as well get what they can now. And I'm like, this is insane to me. But
no, you cannot argue with that.
That
makes perfectly good sense.
And then run for Congress.
That's my dad. So,
and look, this is a grown-up stuff that, look, America is such a great place to live if you keep one eye closed. Okay.
Well, in the Federal Reserve Bank, Rachel Walgate, a teacher, she always talks about that's her favorite field trip to take her students on.
Yes.
And it's the most confusing because no one really understands what it's about or what it does and how they operate, but it's awesome.
Now, to be continued, and I know this will create a raft of emails and letters on books that have you read? Yes, I think, honestly, we've read or reviewed a bunch.
I was going to say, or have you folded the dollar bill a certain way to look at the series? Sorry.
Don't get me started.
Sorry.
And now, Ken, if that's a deeply held belief of yours, we're not mocking it. We are not. We are not. There are people that have truly thought through a lot of stuff we have not thought through. So this is not in any way to be insulting to anybody on any side, red, blue, whatever you are on this. Okay. I'm just saying there's 7 unelected people that are deciding what interest rates are. That's just the fact. And we wait on them to tell us what the base points are going to be. And they've been jacking those points up for the last several years so that now we've got a problem. You have somewhere between 7 and 8% money out there to get a home. There's a bunch of people that are sitting at 2% money. Guess what they're not going to do?
They're not going to sell their house.
They're not going to sell their house. So now you've got Wall Street coming in, knocking off the small houses and the neighborhoods, turning them into rental properties. You got people sitting at 2% money who by now should be on to thinking about their next house because there is a progression on this. And look, real estate's a great way of investing money. It really is. And so they're in the pathway of that long-term investment. It's the biggest investment most people ever make. And it's the kind of investment that if you can get in and make the payment, you don't have to start as a billionaire or a millionaire. This is a good thing. The free market is a great thing. But now you've got an artificial force sitting up saying, we have decided today that it's 8%. Okay, so why would the 2% people move? Now we've got less housing inventory. And the problem with buying a home right now, inventory.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't any. And there hasn't been for years. And there is no future that says it's going to get a lot better.
It's very tough for people who, because of their job, they have to move from one part of the country to another. I mean, maybe they've already bought a house a couple of years ago and they're at 2%. Now they got to buy a house and it's 8%. What are they going to do?
Well, you talk about inventory. Some of these articles talk about builders just building brand new neighborhoods that they are then going to sell off in mass, not to individual buyers. So they're building whole rental neighborhoods from the get-go.
Knowing that those are going to be bought by speculators who are going to do that to rent. But the individual homes being built, the custom homes, and in some other neighborhoods aren't being done. One of my good buddies works in the drywall business, helps run a plant. And he talked about how they used to have to run 3 shifts and they were busy. They're not that busy right now. One of the reasons? Interest rates are so high.
And I'm going to break in right there, take another break on the Public Square. What a great discussion today. You can follow up anytime by listening to us on the publicsquare.com website. You can contact us to that website. You can ask for the monthly update at that website. It's all available at thepublicsquare.com.
Need a breath of fresh air? How about a musical pause that brings a moment of refreshment? Hymns on the Square is the place to gather to hear the inspiring music of artists who have contributed to this mission for decades. Visit thepublicsquare.com and walk on over to Hymns on the Square for a free concert of hope and a breath of fresh air. Hymns on the Square at thepublicsquare.com.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Let's continue the conversation on the Public Square today about real estate and the housing crisis. Dave Zanotti, Alan Duncan, Rob Walgate. Rob Walgate. Where did I come up with
Sounds more
Robert?
fancy.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was it. It is
I like it. It is.
I think Sir Robert
Walgate.
of Walgate. Yes,
Son of Bub. Son of Bub.
Son of Bob, yes.
Son of Bubba. Yes.
Rob Walgate
Son of
and
Bub.
Jeffrey Sanders. All right, gentlemen, let's continue.
But boy, you threw me off with that so far. I can't even remember what the heck we were going to talk about after the break.
You said you wanted to take it.
Yes, the Federal Reserve and the interest points, and now we're stuck. Okay, and then the drywall story. Yeah. So let's track another element back here. And this is going to get creaky. It's just, you can hear the floorboards moving right now. People are going,
here we go. It's like
about this.
I feel like we were just at Cedar Point last week, so I feel like I'm just buckling in, getting ready for the first drop.
We're about to hit the first drop. Does anybody remember COVID?
What was that?
COVID, that time in which the government told us we should be scared to death beyond all imagination and began to track our movement, close down our businesses, shut down churches, and see how far people would comply if they had been made to be afraid.
And masks and vaccines will save us, right? I remember that now.
And then they said something else. They said something else. Now, we forget this one. They said this was Republicans and Democrats alike. They said V-shaped economy. We'll have a V-shaped downturn, and it's like the economy is like a light switch. We'll shut it off for this couple of weeks. Then it was a couple of months. Then it became a couple of years. And when we hit the switch, it'll all come back. You know what? That just didn't work very well, did it? No. We broke supply chains like crazy. We're lucky there's any drywall to be had. I mean, do you remember people standing in line to buy toilet paper?
I remember the toilet paper being gone, is what I remember.
I remember we have a screen in the great room right now. How long was that on a train? Like, we didn't know where it was.
And before it was on the train, they couldn't get the chemicals to build the screen.
Look at Alan's face.
Yes.
I think it's going to be hung on Wednesday, so I'm doing better.
Years later.
It was years,
yes,
actually.
Years later, supply chains have been broken. And when supply chains are broken, guess what? People don't stand around and say, okay, let's just wait for them to come back again, because they have to pay their bills and feed their children too. And so, you know what they do? They move on. And those supply chains, in some cases, have never come back. There are companies that are closed that will never be here again. Now, how does that apply? Let me tell you how it applies to the housing market. It has seriously hurt supply chains for all builders. And now, with interest rates going up and everything else on the scarcity of supplies, pricing has gone up and gone up and gone up and gone up. We talk about in Middle Tennessee, your first starter home, $350,000 to $400,000. Guess what your next move-up house is? $1 million. $1 million. You go from $450,000 to $1 million. Do not stop at $650,000. There's nothing. You're not going to find anything there.
So it's the new California then?
Yes. This is what's happening.
That's because everyone from California is going.
Everybody showed up there.
Every time I go to
New York.
Every time I go to Middle Tennessee, I feel like I hear the same thing. Thank you for visiting. Do not move here. We don't have room.
Yes, and we have no supplies.
We're full.
So what you have happening is you have land sites that are permitted that are stuck because the builders can't make any money. I mean, how many price increases when you decide you're going to spend? And I know this is Scott. So, by the way, does anybody know what the median home price in America is right now? The median, the middle.
408.
It's 425. It's 425.
Yeah, I was just going to give you a stat. If I may, from an article, and this is from March. To determine how these economic shifts are impacting Americans, we analyzed publicly available data from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, Zillow Home Value Index, and U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. We found that home prices have rapidly increased over the last 5 decades, eclipsing the inflation rate by 150% since 1970. In fact, if home prices grew at the same rate as inflation since 1970, the median home price today would be just $177,788 rather than $408,000.
And as of this last month,
it's went up since March.
It's $425,000. The median home is $425,000. That means that half of them are less than that and half of them are more than that. Can you imagine that? I mean, Alan's just like, with 2 kids and a dog, Alan's going, yeah. Somebody save me.
Yeah, I guess I'm staying in my starter home. Bought our starter home 13 years ago. I'm still starting.
No, Wall Street's trying to give you more money to get out of that home.
Hey, I'm going to be the old guy in the movie Up. I'm going to tie the balloons on my house. I'm not moving. I'm dying in the house, okay? You're not getting it.
I want to be Kevin. I want to go on the journey with you. That'd be great.
Come on.
Now, lest you think that we've lost our minds to pagan materialism in total, understand something. There are worse things than living in one home for your whole life. And we're not suggesting that the American dream has got to be the endless ascension into wealth and comfort. Not even though some of the wealthiest people I've ever had the privilege to know never left their first home. Right? That's not what we're talking about here.
Agreed. I'm talking about people being able to ever get that first home.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
There's a Chesterton quote that I really love. He said, "The problem with capitalism isn't too many capitalists, it's too few." Point being, we want more people to be able to be invited to this table. You know, not just a few bigs at the top.
Yeah. Now there is the question of greed. And greed is a part of this problem, and it's affecting everybody in all communities. So what you're seeing here is a window of crisis and a window of opportunity. And so you'd say, okay, how do you beat the system? How do you beat the market? Well, here's what gets difficult. You've got a house that to get into, it's $425. That's median, and that means it's nothing special, folks. It's just kind of not just is it just a middle price? It's kind of a middle house. I mean, $425. You're not getting 400. You're not getting 4,000 square feet. I'm telling you right now. No. I mean, they didn't put the square footage price in there, but think about just think about the square. I have seen square footage prices for dumps at $305 a square foot, $305 a square foot for 1,000 foot dump. I mean, I can't believe it's not condemned. Now, this is going on all over the place. It's particularly going on in many of the hot real estate markets where this broadcast is heard and where people are associated with the public square. And so we've got a real problem. So we're not talking about greed, but look at this. When you're going to go buy $1 million house, right, which I'm not in the neighborhood. I mean,
nobody here is going to go do that.
I've got friends in real estate, and I've looked, and you know what they show me? They show me the Home Depot stuff that's inside the house is finished work. You know why? Because you can get that stuff. You can't get the stuff that used to be put in $1 million home because now it's priced out of the market. So you got $1 million home builders going to Home Depot putting the same thing in that people are putting in starter houses. Now think about that. Think about that reality. Not only is the square footage shrinking, but the quality of what you're actually getting is shrinking. So maybe what we should do is to just hold an entire a prayer service for everyone deciding to say, forget anything to do with buying a home, and let's just all decide to be happy where we are and content and live where we are and drop it. Let's just drop it. What if all the people just said, what if we all went up? What if we all said, that's it, we're done, we've had it. We've had it. We just, tell those 7 guys at the Fed Reserve, look, here's a better idea. Keep all the money. You can keep it. We don't want it. All right, we'll figure out how we're going to do it ourselves, and thank you very much for shopping. What if people started to go back to Mayberry? I mean, what if they started to let rooms, let houses out to people who needed help and said, you know what, we're just here to help. Yeah, we'll make a little, but how can we help you? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's not being done. This isn't my idea. I'm just saying somewhere there's got to be an honest response from a position that's not built on greed. Somewhere, right?
This has been an energized conversation, but it's not over. There's one more segment coming up for those of you who stay with us. For those of you who can't, thepublicsquare.com or the smartphone app is the solution. We're going to continue talking about this housing crisis next on The Public Square. Back with you on The Public Square. I don't know if this fits into what we're talking about here today, but I've had reason lately to look at commercial real estate. And where I live in the Chicago suburbs, there is not a building within miles of me right now that does not have a large for lease sign out front. Every building has available space. I have to think it's because of COVID. A lot of people are working at home. Offices are finding that that's possible. People aren't coming back. I'm also looking at a very close friend who has a company of 25,000 square feet. Everybody's scattered, went to work at home. He's now downsizing his lease to 5,000 square feet. So I don't know if this fits into what we're talking about, Dave, but this,
ding, ding, ding. Wait a second.
This commercial real estate thing is really critical right now.
But who says that you can't convert a commercial real estate property into residential? Now, I know there's laws, I know there's codes, I know there's counties, and I know there's a lot of people with vested interests, but what if somebody built a model that says, okay, we'll take that commercial real estate and we'll just start building ownership condominiums where you can get in, and there you go.
That's a really good idea.
Americans, they figure stuff like this out. Once they realize they're being bullied, they're really good at figuring stuff out. So if we've got all this commercial real estate and people don't have to go to work anymore, okay, maybe there's a model. Now, I recognize it's going to take a lot of moving of people in political power and zoning and everything else, but we did win a world war that we weren't ready for. I mean, maybe we did put somebody on the moon. You think we can't figure out rent? Okay, Alan, you had a thought.
Well, I wanted to anticipate a potential critique of our conversation. Some
beyond Dave, you're sincerely an extreme moron.
Careful.
Yes, beyond that.
Don't give them ammunition, Dave.
I do have a copyright on the word moron, by the way, just so you know.
I find it in the Greek New Testament.
Yes,
so how did you?
I trademarked it in English. Yeah. So I'm the only one that can use it on a golf course. It's called Moron Golf, and that's
I should get T-shirts.
Yes. We have them actually.
I hear some people saying, "Look, you're making too big a deal about this." In 2021, these big institutional investors that you're talking about really only owned 300,000 U.S. homes, which made up 2% of single-family rental homes. So that's 2% of the whole market. It's very small. Now, I did notice Rob sent a more updated piece around this morning. As of 2022, that number was up to 5%. And then I'm looking at another piece that Rob sent around, the CNBC article. There was a quote in there that said institutional investors may control 40% of U.S. single-family rental homes by 2030. So maybe today it's 5%, but I think that you talk about a V curve, I think it's going to go through the roof.
In 7 years.
And does Rob get the dollar raise for providing more accurate research than what you brought to the table earlier today? This is what I'm
Well, he brought the up-to-date. I'm laying foundation.
Based upon he's giving current interest rates.
Rob's the numbers guy. Okay, Rob is the numbers guy.
And also, and here's the other thing that I think we have to watch over the next 18 months, 24 months, it's going to play into this. One of the things that took off over the past few years have been short-term rentals, the Airbnbs, the VRBOs, and there's a lot of people that bought those on speculation. There is not a high demand right now for short-term rentals. Those people are losing money, and they're at a high pressure to sell.
They're also losing political ground because communities are saying they don't want it anymore.
Yes, so they're under high pressure to sell. So who will they sell to? They're going to have to recoup some losses. Listen, they had it good for a number of years. When people could work remote, go wherever they wanted, and no one was concerned about it, people were disappearing into those short-term rentals.
I've got a question. So with all of this going on and all this turmoil, and I'll use the term very loosely, crisis, is this an opportunity for government to inject itself and say, we're here to save the day, and we're going to write this law, and we're going to protect you poor middle-class people?
All right. Before we can get government involved, though, it's got to be something that can be talked about out loud. And we had to do a lot of digging to get to source documents on where this story really is, because it's actually, people are talking about it all over the place, but you'll notice it's not buried in the silos. It's not in the silos of Fox News versus CNN. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, it's not yet reached the level where it's being discussed in regards to the 2024 national elections.
No.
So the question is, will people be able to bring this crisis to a point where it begins to get talked about as to how do we solve the problem?
And I think it could happen in a neighborhood at a time, in the sense that, I'll use my parents for an example. They live in a neighborhood where they own the unit they live in, but anyone that purchases a unit from here on out is not permitted to rent their unit out, because they saw some people buy on speculation. They saw some people. So the owners,
sure, it can happen bottom up,
all bonded together, and we're like, wait a minute here. We want people in this community that are vested here.
Well, and I just had a thought: if somebody's listening and they're thinking, I have my house is paid off, this really doesn't apply to me, I would just encourage you to just think about your kids and or your grandkids? What world are they inheriting? I have a home, but are my kids going to have an opportunity to buy a house? It's something we got to think about.
Good point, Alan.
Already there with my kids. My kids are adults, and it's very difficult. In fact, only one right now can actually purchase a house.
Yes.
The others cannot.
And this is, Wayne, this is all over the country, wherever we have friends or staff or supporters, we're just a little teeny tiny microcosm of the outcry that's going on around the country. And it is yet to reach political mass, if you will, in regards to the electoral side of it. So let's set down some fundamental parameters as how to, if in fact some political consultant is listening and going, I've been thinking about that, maybe this is the moment that I'm going to make the new Forgotten Man campaign is going to be the forgotten person in search of a home, right? Very powerful potential. So will they have the courage to say, those 7 people, behind the curtain, how come they keep raising rates? Now, we're told it's because they want to tap down inflation.
Yep, right.
Okay, I'm sorry. You don't have to get like 3 paragraphs into the Federal Reserve before things get really creepy, right? I mean, that's it. So wait a second. The response to COVID and shutting down the economy like a light switch, the V-shaped thing that totally blew us up and blew up supply chains. And I've talked to builders who 2 years ago were saying that big builders, they've gotten completely out of residential home building altogether because they can build them, but they can't make any money because they can't control the costs because they're still dealing with all the broken supply chains. Now, you know what? 2 years later, we're living with those terrible decisions that were made during COVID. Now, how do you get these people up off their back and get them back into the game? Well, some people are going to say, the answer is government incentives. Let's start to do this. Wait just a minute. Where's Dave Ramsey when you need him? All right? We don't need any more debt from the government to fix this problem. What we need to do is to get all the people that are getting slammed by it to start asking questions about how to solve it and prayerfully to figure out what can they do from the bottom up. Now, I know it sounds naive and hopeless. Dave, you naive moron. All right, that we could believe that by God's grace, people of faith in communities and people of goodwill could unite together and say, we can fix this problem. But let me tell you what happens if you don't. You go to a place like where our office is in wonderful Franklin, Tennessee. It's got a reputation of being one of those most sought-after communities in the Mid-South, Franklin, Tennessee. You got a position now where you're developing, it's suddenly become Naples, Florida. You have people building gated communities, and then everybody lives a county over that can't afford to live in a gated community. So you know what happens up one of the main streets in Franklin? 4 chain restaurants close in the same month. You know why? Because they have no one they can employ, because no one can afford to live in Franklin, Tennessee, because they can't afford a house. They can't even afford a rental property there. So they have to move a county over. And you know what? You can't work a lot of lower income to medium income jobs and have to commute an hour both ways. Right. You can't afford it. So suddenly they've got no labor force. It's like living in Naples.
Can we stop it from getting to that 40% before 2030? It's going to take us not selling our homes to these large investment corporations. Do you want to live in Pottersville or Bedford Falls?
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.